Welcome to the show on that. I am your host, Bill Senese, as always, here to bring you the greatest and latest of information on account management. My favorite topic, B2B account management. As always, the show on that can be found at willnada.com/the show on that or on YouTube at youtube.com/at the show on that. Today's topic is verbal communication. And we're going to do things a little bit differently here today. Normally, I have a couple of guest panelists with me to help dive deep into the topic, but today you're stuck with just me because this is kind of a preview to a little bit of a deeper dive into different areas of verbal communication. So I didn't think it made sense to bring in other panelists here today just to give you guys an overview of verbal communication. So I'm going to take that on myself here, and I will handle the details for you all here today. And then on our next episode, when we dive into the specific pieces of verbal communication, I'll bring in some excellent panelists to help you guys fully understand the topic. So when I say verbal communication, basically what I'm referring to is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm talking to you all and providing you with a little bit of a verbal communication, providing you with some verbal communication as opposed to something written like an email, which would of course then be email communication. This is going to be the kind of communication that you get when you are one-on-one with somebody like we are right now, whether you're in a small group or a large group, whether you're on a main stage communicating out to a large group of people, or if you're one-to-one with your largest customer, your everyday contact, somebody you meet with all the time, and you're sitting having a conversation, whether you're in the same room or virtually in the same place, whether you're talking on the phone, on a computer, or face-to-face, all of these are different types of verbal communication. And they're all really important ways for an account manager to convey their message. Now, we've talked about email communication quite a bit in a prior episode, and we really dove deep into how the value of email communication, it's not time-bound. You can send something at one time, somebody can respond back to you at another time. You don't need to be in synchrony when you send and receive emails. They're also large and they're also able to be scaled very easily, meaning you could send cold emails to hundreds, if not thousands of recipients pretty quickly and easily, whereas trying to do the same over the phone would be pretty difficult. But there are some drawbacks to email also. They're not super personal. You know, you get an email from somebody and you don't know if you're the only recipient or if you're one of thousands of recipients. And that might make you wonder, is this really meant for me, or is this just a broad blast that everybody's receiving? They also can be misinterpreted. An email is read, meaning that I receive the email, I read it, and I interpret it. There's no ability for the person sending the email to provide context. I can't show you that I'm smiling as I say something, or that I'm frowning and really, really worried about the thing that I'm telling you right now. I can't use my hands and talk big and really exemplify the thing it is that I want you to say. But more importantly, I can't correct you if you understand something wrong. In a verbal conversation, if somebody doesn't understand you, they can say, you know, I'm not really clear on this. Can you explain what you meant? In an email, they can email that question back to you. But more often than not, what happens is they understand it the way they read it. And then you, as the account manager who sent the email, are kind of victim to whatever their interpretation is. So verbal communication gives you the opportunity to control the dialogue. Whether you're virtually communicating or in the same room with somebody communicating, when you speak with them, you can use your body language to really convey that message, to make sure that they're understanding exactly what it is that you want them to take away from that message. That makes verbal communication all the more impactful when you're using it, because you know that that message is going to be conveyed and going to be understood. And if it's not, you know that you'll have the opportunity right then and there to correct that misunderstanding. For that reason, I recommend using verbal communication anytime that there's ambiguity to the conversation, anytime that emotions are running kind of high, if there's a deal that's been struck, or if there's a deal that's stuck, or if you're trying to get a deal unstuck, that's a great time to meet in person or verbally. And of course, if there's multiple stakeholders and you need alignment quickly. So you need to work with a bunch of different individuals. You need to get their alignment, maybe all at the same time. Verbal communications can really be the better channel for that. Emotions running high is one that I definitely want to double click on for a second. Great example for me was I had a customer once who was really upset with me. They were not getting the product that they expected. The terms weren't coming through the way that they had anticipated. Basically, everything that we had agreed upon in our prior conversations was not coming through for them the way that they anticipated it. So I had sent an email, got no response, sent another email, got no response, finally sent a third email and got a response back that was basically just short and simple. I'm not happy. Got that communication, and I knew it was time to flip away from email and move to verbal. I was just trying to follow up and make sure that everything was good. So that's why I was sending emails. But once I got those words back, I'm not happy, I knew it was time for me to jump in and actually have a conversation. Got on the phone with the customer, understood exactly what it was that they weren't happy about, was able to take some quick action on my side, fix some things that could be fixed, re-explain some things to the customer that maybe they hadn't fully understood, and ultimately get everybody on the same page and keep that deal alive and moving forward. It wasn't that difficult of an opportunity. It wasn't that difficult to save the situation once I actually jumped into it with my customer and talked it through instead of just trying to email it through. Verbal communications allow for that genuine human contact, which makes them just a little bit more personable than an email and gives you a little bit more opportunity to influence your customer as opposed to just giving them some words to read. Now, when we talk about verbal communications, there's some different types of them. I kind of glossed through them, but I want to dive just a little deeper into each of them here. And these are what we're going to cover in future episodes. First of all, there's in-person meetings. When you're in the same room as somebody, that's an in-person meeting. There's virtual meetings. When you're not in the same room as somebody, that's a virtual meeting. When you're meeting through a computer screen. And then, of course, there's phone calls. Phone calls are absolutely verbal communication, but they're not done via computer. They're not done in the same room. They're done on the phone. So each of those formats has its strengths. Each of them has its weaknesses. And we're going to dive deep into each of those to really understand what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of each of those. And then within some of those, there's additional categories. For example, within an in-person meeting, there's one-to-one meetings. When you're meeting one-on-one with somebody verbally in person, that would be a one-to-one meeting. A small group meeting could be you meeting with 3 or 4 or 5 members from your customer's team, or you and another person or a few people from your team meeting with a small group from their team. Now there's multiple personalities in that meeting. There's a little bit more of a group dynamic that you need to learn and understand how to manage as an account manager. Lastly, there's one-to-many meetings where you are the center stage, either literally up on the center stage or sometimes in a smaller environment where you're presenting to a group, but you are the person that they are here to listen to. It's not necessarily a dialogue when you're in a one-to-many meeting. It's more of a monologue. You are here to tell people things, and they are going to listen to you in a one-to-many environment. So those are 3 different examples of in-person meetings that we're going to dive deeper into each of those when we do our episode on in-person meetings. Now, virtual meetings have a lot of those same different types. You can have a one-to-one virtual meeting. You can have a one-to-many virtual meeting. You can have a small group virtual meeting. In fact, what we're doing right now is a bit of a one-to-many virtual meeting. I'm here talking to all of you. You're listening. You're not necessarily doing the talking back to me. A little bit of a monologue, not my goal for this show, but today, since I'm solo, monologue is about all that I have to offer for you. In a virtual meeting, there's some benefits over in person. First and foremost, face-to-face contact without travel. I'll tell you, look, as an account manager, traveling to see your customers tends to be important. Depending on your role, it may be a higher or lower part of what you do, bigger or smaller part of what you do. But going to see a customer in person, meeting with them face-to-face, absolutely makes an impact. However, it takes a lot of time out of your day. A great example is I'm going to be traveling to visit a customer here soon, and I'm packing as much as I can into this 3-day trip, but traveling there takes time. Getting in and out of an airport, a hotel, all that stuff takes time. The meetings themselves take time. And in the end, I'm going to get to meet with 3 different customers across 3 days while by doing my absolute best to pack all of those meetings into the trip that I'm making. So virtual, I can have 8, 10, 12, 14 meetings in a day by sitting at my desk and talking to my customers through my computer, through my camera, like I am right now. Virtual meetings are also great because they allow you to have a real-time conversation fast. You don't have to wait for an email response. You don't have to wait and wonder what somebody's thinking. You get that benefit of body language, of the visual portion of the communication. So you can see what your customer's thinking a little bit, whether they're tentative, whether they're on the same page, but again, without actually having to travel to be with them. Lastly, you have the ability to share screens, review materials, or even demonstrate solutions. Can't tell you how many times I've been on a video call with a customer where they ask me a question and I answer them by showing them as opposed to actually saying the answer. On a phone call, you'd be limited to just speaking that answer. Heck, even on an in-person meeting, unless you happen to have your computer up and a screen loaded for them to look at, the ability to show them something from your computer is a little bit less than on a virtual meeting where you have everything. You're sitting at your desk with multiple screens. You can have different windows open. You can quickly and easily say, okay, we're going to flip over to this one here, and I want to show this thing to you. So definitely some pros to verbal communication. Of course, the con is that you need to actually have a good setup and a good connection. For example, you need to have a decent camera, a decent microphone, good lighting, a background that you can sit in front of comfortably and talk to people. And then last but not least, a strong internet connection, because I can't tell you how many times it's happened. It happened to me with a coworker on a call earlier today where their connection just wasn't very good. And I was doing my best to translate for the customer because I kind of knew what it was they were trying to say. But we got to a point where they started going one direction. I didn't quite follow, and I was interpreting completely wrong. So that strong internet connection, absolutely an important component if you're going to do virtual meetings. Now, there's one other thing to really be aware of when it comes to verbal communication versus email communication, and that's the off the record versus on the record nature of verbal communication. When you communicate via email, everything you do is on the record. You send somebody an email, they very well may print it, they may archive it, they may forward it, they may share it, they may go back to it and reference it later as a tool to say, look, this is what we talked about, this is what we discussed. They're going to hold you to whatever you said, and your customer is going to be a little closer to the vest with what they say to you. They may or may not be willing to share things quite as freely if they know that the conversation is quote unquote on the record. That same thing translates to a virtual meeting. Virtual meetings nowadays are very often being recorded, whether that's because people are using AI tools to transcribe the call, whether that's because they want to be able to go back and reference the material later. If you're doing a virtual call that's being recorded, that's on the record, same as an email. An in-person meeting is almost always off the record. You're sitting in a room with somebody one-on-one. There's no cameras. There's no tape recorder. You're just having a conversation. That allows you to speak freely. That allows your customer to speak freely. Allows you guys to have really candid conversations that you may or may not be able to have via email or even via a virtual call. So you have to kind of start weighing out these pros and cons when you have a certain situation. Is this an urgent matter? Okay, probably need to have a verbal communication over an email. Is this something I want on the record? Do I want a record of this agreement that we're making? Probably want to send an email for your customer to confirm back to so that it is on the record. So you got to start thinking through, as an account manager, what are my goals for this meeting? What am I trying to accomplish? And what is the best mechanism for me to actually accomplish that? Lastly, I mentioned phone calls as part of verbal communication, and that is, of course, a very important component of verbal communication. And phone calls come in two forms. They're scheduled and unscheduled. A scheduled phone call is basically a virtual meeting. You're meeting with somebody at a set time. They know you're going to call. You call them. You meet about a certain topic. You might even have an agenda, and you're just using the phone as a different tool than the computer. You've eliminated the video, but you've also eliminated the bandwidth, the internet, the setup, all of those things. An unscheduled call is when you just pick up your phone, dial the phone, and talk to somebody. Unscheduled calls, definitely recommend that you use those a little sparingly. Most professionals have full days. I know my calendar tends to be packed from start to finish every day. If I get a random phone call, it can really throw off my day. Now, I don't mind. If one of my customers calls me and it's random, I'm absolutely going to answer that, and I'm going to do my best to make time in my day to handle whatever it is that they needed handled. But the customer, if you're the account manager and you're making unscheduled calls to your customer, you might be disrupting their day in a way that they're not okay with. And what ends up happening over time is that their phone rings, it's you, they're not going to answer because they recognize that when you call, it's not really a valuable use of their time, or it's going to disrupt their day to the point that they don't want to take that call. So I recommend using scheduled calls over unscheduled, unless it's like a last minute thing. Just needed a quick answer on this one thing. We talked about it. You've got all the details. Just wanted to quickly ask you a question. Or if you're having trouble getting a hold of somebody, you can't get that call scheduled, you haven't gotten responses to your emails, go ahead, make an unscheduled call, and you should get an answer from somebody that way. But a few things to think about on an unscheduled call: be brief, keep it short, don't elaborate, don't go on and on. Respect the fact that you've disrupted their day. Take your couple minutes and be on with it. Start your conversation with, is this a good time? Do you have a few minutes to talk? Would you mind if I took just a minute of your day? I just have a quick question. Set the stage. Let them know that it's going to be fast, but ask permission to take those couple of minutes from them. And then if you hear them really hesitate, yeah, I guess I could take a couple of minutes. Or you can hear tons of noise in the background. They're clearly not at their desk. They're clearly not in a place where they can have a good conversation. Might be better to just say, hey, let me call you at another time. Can you tell me what a better time would be? So use that unscheduled call to actually find out when is it the best time for you guys to have your call, and then call them back at that time. Pretty simple stuff there. Phone calls, though, definitely an important part of a verbal communication toolkit for an account manager. Now, cold calling is something that account managers sometimes do. If you're fortunate and you've got a good book of business, you probably aren't doing a lot of cold calling. And I hope that you're not, because I think account managers are most effective when they already know their customers. We're not necessarily business developers. If you're a business developer, then absolutely, cold calling is probably part of your business, a part of your day-to-day. If you are a rep who's a lead generation rep, cold calling is definitely going to be part of your role. But as an account manager, you should have a pretty good idea of who your customer is, who's in your book of business. Unless you have a brand new book and you're just trying to get introduced, then you might do some cold calling. But I'm not going to focus a whole lot on cold calling. I'm not going to be your strategist for cold calling. This show, much like my book, we're not going to spend any more time than what we just did on cold calling, because I don't consider it to be a core part of what account managers do, or for that matter, what they should do. So all of that said, verbal communication, incredibly important for an account manager. If you can't speak to your customer, you're not going to succeed as an account manager. Whether you're doing it in a one-to-one environment, a small group environment, or you are literally the main stage at a huge event, an account manager needs to be able to verbally communicate with their audience. Whether it's an audience of 1 or 1,000, you need to be able to get your message across to your audience so that they understand it. And whether you're logging into Zoom and having that conversation on a computer, or if you're walking into a boardroom and having that conversation in person, or if you're picking up the phone and talking to your customer, you need to be able to convey your message in a way that gets it across to them and allows them to get their thoughts back to you. So what we're going to do next is we're going to dive deep into each of these different sections. We're going to go deep into in-person. We're going to go deep into virtual. We'll go deep into phone calls. We'll talk about one-to-many. We'll talk about one-to-one. We'll talk about small group. We'll get into each of those. And I'm going to bring in some of my expert panelists to help them give me their insights so that you don't have to deal with another episode of just me telling you about a topic. But that's going to be it for the preview to verbal communication. Next time around, like I said, we'll dive deep into these different topics. Let's go ahead for now, though, and let's just wrap up our show for today and let you know that next up is going to be that in-person communication. That's what's going to be up first, is going to be our in-person communication, followed by virtual, followed by phone calls, and we'll have some great panelists for those. Speaking of panelists, I would love to have you on the show on that. So if you're an expert, whether you're an expert on in-person meetings, virtual meetings, phone calls, verbal conversations, or anything else that's part of being a B2B account manager, would love to have you on the show on that. Also open to other topics. If you're an expert on something that has nothing to do with B2B account management, but you'd like to share your expertise with the world, by all means, let me know. Would love to have you on the show. Would love to learn from you and just help host the show so that you can share your message with the world. Head on over to willnada.com/the show on that, fill out the form, or get a hold of me any way that you prefer. Of course, the show on that airs every second Wednesday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for tuning in this week. We hope to catch you next week. And if you could do me a huge favor, jump over on YouTube, like this video, leave me a comment, subscribe to the show on that YouTube channel. That would really help me get this show out to a broader audience. And then, of course, if you're looking to learn more about B2B account management and you feel like, hey, I want to get a little bit ahead of the pace of this show, or I prefer to read instead of listen, we do have the book on that, B2B account management, available for purchase on Amazon. Just go ahead on Amazon and look for the book on that, B2B account management. And of course, if you've already read the book on that B2B account management, leave me a 5-star review. That would definitely help to get the book on that out to a broader audience as well. That's it for today's show on that. I'm Bill Senese, and I look forward to catching you all on the next episode. And I look forward to catching you all on the next episode.